Hey, today I want to talk about tuning. Maybe it's something that is new for you and that's why you clicked on this video. You want to know how to do it accurately, and I'm going to show you that. Or maybe it's something that you've done for years and years and you could do with your hands tied behind your back. And if that's the case, that's cool too. I am going to show you a trick at the end of the video that maybe you didn't know, especially if you're a guitar player, that can help you to tune more accurately as a bass player. So when do you need to tune your bass? I would say anytime you pick your bass up, you should tune it, because changes in temperature or humidity can affect your tuning. Maybe you accidentally bumped it on the way to the gig or when you were getting it out of your case, or maybe you have a prankster in your band. I've had this before in between sets where someone will tune your tuning peg and knock you way out of tune. So you should always double check your tuning before you play, even if you're in the middle of a show, right? Between songs, whatever. I would encourage you to tune as much as you can, because there's nothing worse than an out of tune bass. What notes are we tuning? So our lowest string in pitch is going to be an E, and then A, D, and G. If you're playing a 5-string bass, your lowest one will be a B, and your highest one will be a C if you have a 6-string bass. And that's assuming we're tuning to standard tuning, which is pretty much most of the time for bass players. To actually tune it, all you're doing is you're rotating these tuning pegs. You're going to play open string without fretting anything, and see how the line is red and to the left. That means we are flat. So we need to raise the pitch. We're going to rotate our tuning peg until that line goes green in the center, and that means we are in key and we are in tune. You go to the next string, which is reading to the right, which means we're sharp. So we're going to go the opposite direction of rotation until that line goes green. And actually, I'm going to go a hair past center until we're flat, and then rise up into it. I like to go from below, right? So I like to have a note that's flat and raise the pitch until it's in tune, rather than having a note that's sharp and dropping the pitch, because I find it's more stable if you tune into the note. Okay, let's talk about some of the different types of tuners that you could use. The easiest thing would be to get a free tuning app on your phone, but I would encourage you to spend a little bit of money on a nicer tuning app. I really like the Peterson tuner. I think it's the best one that I've found. Look how fast it is and how quick and accurate it is at picking up my voice. And also, it does a pretty good job of picking up low frequencies. So if you held this next to your bass amp, it would pick up the notes pretty well. It's not always the case with apps. And then a step up from there would be something like a clip-on tuner, and those clip on to your headstock, and they pick up the vibration of the wood when you play a note and read the note. So those are really helpful too. One brand that I really like for that is Snark. And then finally, my favorite, I think the most reliable option, is a dedicated pedal. I think you should probably have all three of these, honestly, because they're helpful in different situations. You don't always have access to your pedal board. But I like a pedal because it's you can plug it in, so you don't have to worry about batteries, because those Snark batteries, or those tuning clip-on tuners, they do go dead at really inconvenient times. So with a tuner, you could have this battery powered, or you could have it plugged in, so you wouldn't have to worry about power as much. And then also, you can use it as a mute, which is super helpful. That comes in handy a lot of times. So those are 3 different types of tuners. What about if you don't have a tuner with you, or maybe the piano is out of tune and you're tuning to the piano and the piano note is between 2 pitches? Sometimes that happens, right? So let's say the piano player gives you a G and you're tuning to that. So if we play an open G, it's going to be the same note as the 5th fret of the D string, and then the same pattern going down. So the open D is going to be the 5th fret of the A string. You let them ring out together and listen to if they're in tune. Same thing going down. The open A string will be the same as the 5th fret of the E string. Right? So it's like open is the same as the 5th fret of the note below it. I'm going to show you another way that I think is helpful. That's using harmonics. So you can play a harmonic by playing a string without touching the fret, right? So you just take your finger and you just touch the string, but you don't press it down. You just rest your finger on it right above a fret, right? And harmonics are all over the neck, but if you are to play the 7th fret of the G string right over the fret, and then you played a harmonic on the 5th fret of the D string, those should be the same note, and it's helpful. I'm going to drop it out of tune for a second. So listen to this. You hear that? You want that warble to disappear. So hear how it went away? Basically, if you hear that warble, you know it's out of tune. And if you, as you're getting closer to the correct pitch, that warble will get slower. So it will be fast, and then as you get closer, it's slowing down, and then it will finally level out. And if you go too far, it'll start to come back on the other side and get faster again. So basically, listen for the warble, and if the warble is getting faster, you're getting further away, and if it's getting slower, then you're getting closer. So that same pattern, 7 and 5, so 7 of the G, 5 of the D, going down. So then 7 of the D, 5 of the A. It's a little out. Hear the warble? And then it's gone. I just barely touched it, and then it went back in. And then again, the 7th fret of the A will be the 5th fret of the E with harmonics, right? And remember, harmonics are where you're barely touching the string right over the fret. I like using that method because I think harmonics are really good at helping you to hear clearly if you're in or out of tune, especially when you're not using a tuner. I want to show you one more way how to tune your bass. This one might not be as familiar to you if you are a guitar player, but I do think is cool. So hear me out. Guitar players typically tune their guitar to open strings, right? Which makes sense because the nature of the instrument of guitar, playing chords is a big part of the technique, where you have open strings and you're playing chords with strings that are ringing out open. But we don't do that as much as bass players. We typically are playing one note at a time, and we're typically fretting notes. Sometimes you'll play an open E, sometimes you'll play an open A, but very rarely am I going to play an open D string or an open G. Just because of the nature of the instrument. There's certainly exceptions, but for most forms of bass playing, most songs, I'm not going to be playing notes on the open D string or open G string. Bear with me. So as you're shortening, let's say if you're fretting a string, you're shortening its length, right? So if you played an open string, the length of the string is from here to here. But if you played a B flat on the 6th fret, now the length of the string is changing from here to here, right? So we went from a string that's this long to a string that's this long. As you're shortening a string, you're ever so slightly affecting your intonation. Even if you have a good setup, there might be a tiny bit of difference between being in tune here and being in tune here. So you see what I'm getting at? If you're less likely to play an open string as a bass player, what if you tuned to the key of the song that you're about to play? So instead of tuning to an open E, if you're about to play a song in B flat, why not play B flat and tune to that B flat? I would play the notes on a string that I'm most likely to play and tune to those pitches, because there might be a tiny difference in intonation between your open string and the string that you're fretting. So that's a trick that might give you just a tiny bit of extra accuracy. And if you're going to be accurate with something, might as well be your tuning, right? So we're getting into some really fine details here and technicalities, but I think it's worth tuning. Instead of to all open strings, tune to the notes that you're most likely to play when you're recording. So that's a little trick. You might think it's silly. Let me know if you think it's silly. I think it's cool. I think it's helpful, and I think it does make you a little bit more accurate as a bass player. And it does remind me too to bring up the point of check your intonation. Make sure that your bass is set up properly, because you want to be able to play any note on your neck and it will be in tune. But if your intonation is a little bit off, it won't be the case. And being in tune, I think, is one of the most important things that we have to do as a bass player. So I do have a bass course. If you're interested, I'm going to put a link to that in the description. And I try to do videos every Wednesday. So if you enjoyed this or learned something, please consider subscribing. If not, that's okay too. And I'll see you next week. Thanks.